Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 331. I'm recording this episode on January 9th, 2025, and this will go live on January 13th, 2025. So we're cruising through the new year. So I hope it's going well for you. And I know my podcast is meant to be evergreen, but every once in a while, there's something that's happening in real time as I'm recording the episode that I really feel compelled to speak to. So if you're listening and you're in California and you are currently affected by the fires in Los Angeles, I am just sending you so much strength and so much hope and just hoping for the absolute best for you as you work through this really difficult time. Okay, so what I wanted to do today is focus on teaching online classes. And so what you're going to get out of this episode is the step-by-step way to teach online classes with ease, with just a sense of fun, a sense of lightness, and really feeling confident. I mean, everything that I do here on the show is designed to help you feel more confident. And I can't forget that there's a whole bunch of yoga teachers out there that are teaching yoga online, either as a result of the pandemic or even before the pandemic. I mean, I was using the online medium to train yoga teachers inside my signature program, the Yoga Anatomy Blueprint Learning Program, long before the pandemic happened in 2020. So I was already well versed with using Zoom, with teaching online, with training yoga teachers online in all sorts of different time zones. And then when the pandemic happened, everybody shifted to online teaching. And one of the things that happened was there was this perception that, well, if we're teaching online, we absolutely need to be practicing with students because, of course, that's just what makes logical sense. They're going to be looking at their screen, so we need to be doing it. And I definitely do not subscribe to that way of thinking. And I'm going to go into the logic behind my frame of reference in today's episode. So you're not only going to learn a step-by-step way to teach online, and if you're already doing it, this will hopefully just kind of give you more inspiration to do it in a way that helps you feel even more confident. We're also, though, going to address that belief that so many yoga teachers have, that you might even have, that if I'm teaching online, I have to be practicing with my students because, and I'm just guessing here, because they need to see what I'm doing because I'm not in the room with them and I can't help them as much as if I were in the room. Whatever the logic is, the action is, most yoga teachers that I've seen who teach an online class are doing pretty much the entire practice with their online students. And again, please hear me. If you enjoy doing that and it feels like your authentic way, your most authentic way of showing up, then keep doing it. All I'm asking is that you be honest with yourself about whether or not you truly want to do that, or if you're doing it simply because everybody else that you see does it, and you're just assuming that that's the way it has to be done. Much of what I do is bust beliefs that yoga teachers have that they didn't come up with. They absorbed them, they picked them up in conversation from other teachers, they were told things in teacher training. And I look at what we do as yoga teachers in a lot of different ways from how the general population of yoga teachers do. And I don't do it just to be contrary. I do it out of a very strong belief that the methodologies and the practices and the teaching protocols that I offer to teachers are better designed, and I'm definitely going to say it, are better designed to help yoga teachers be their most confident and their most authentic. And when you are teaching in that way, you are unstoppable. You will keep teaching forever. I mean, I just turned 60 last year in 2024. I intend on teaching until I'm dead. And I can do that in large part because I have a modality of teaching where I'm walking around the room. So when my body gets to the point, hopefully it never does, although let's just say I get injured, or let's just say I'm 75 and it's a little hard for me to move on a particular day, I don't need to do the yoga to teach a great class, because pretty much for my entire career, I've been doing the walk and talk. I have not inextricably linked doing the practice with teaching the practice. Unlike so many other teachers, not because they wanted to, but simply because that's what they saw. And you may be this way yourself. You may think this is just the way it's done. And so when you come here on my podcast, Conversations for Yoga Teachers, you're probably going to hear things that you don't hear anyplace else. And it's up to you to say, do I really want to experiment with this? Like, wow, that sounds kind of interesting. I'd like to try that out. And that's completely your prerogative. So unlike a lot of other narratives you'll hear, I am never here to say it's my way or the highway, it's my way or the other way is wrong. And that is what other yoga teachers say. They present their way of teaching as the right way. And many yoga teachers do it and refer back to the history of yoga. And so they try to sort of, in a way, gaslight the yoga teacher into thinking, well, it has to be done this way because that's the way it's been done for thousands of years. And yes, and that doesn't mean that's how I have to teach it, right? And so, one of the concepts that fall into this category is cueing to the breath all the time. I was teaching a class recently and there was a yoga teacher in the class, and she asked me afterwards, I noticed she didn't cue a lot to the breath. And so we had this really good conversation about what is the inspiration that you might have to cueing to the breath all the time. Knowing that breathing is an autonomic response of your body. Your students will be breathing whether or not you tell them to breathe or not. And yes, breathing is a huge part of the yoga practice. But if you are teaching and it's difficult for you to fit in cueing to the breath along with the actual cues, why would you keep doing that? You're only making it harder for yourself to enjoy teaching and to have it feel easy and fun. But the reason many yoga teachers do continue to cue to the breath, especially that mode of breathing cueing where it's one breath to one move it. So inhale, sweep up, exhale, forward fold, inhale, halfway up, exhale to plank, hold, lower down slowly, inhale, upward facing dog, exhale, downward facing dog. Right? For many teachers, they tell me that is hard for them to do. They get confused about, is it inhaling or exhaling? And students tell me they get confused if they're not in sync with what the teacher's saying. So why do we continue to do it? Well, teachers continue to do it because that's what they're told to do. And it's presented in a way that this is the right way. And I just do not buy that logic. And I hope that you don't either. Because on the other side of that logic is you having the confidence to step forward and teach how you want. And that is my definition of what it looks like to be an empowered yoga teacher. An empowered yoga teacher doesn't need anybody's permission to not cue to the breath all the time. An empowered yoga teacher has their own logic for why they teach the way they do. So in this particular situation, when that teacher said to me, why don't you cue to the breath all the time? I was able to say, well, I like to focus on the movements and using the limited amount of time that we have for every single yoga pose to focus my students on what are the key movements I want you to do, knowing that they will be breathing. And because I can be so efficient in how I share my cues and get them into the pose in a really good and comfortable way, giving them clear action cues, then I have 2 or 3 seconds in every single pose where I can do whatever I want as a top off. I could cue to the breath. I could cue to anatomy. I could cue to somatics. I could ask an inquiry question. I could leave them in silence and shut up. Wouldn't that be amazing? But for so many teachers, their head is filled with all this stuff that they think they need to do. And this is what I call permission-based teaching instead of empowered, confident teaching. Wouldn't you rather be the kind of teacher who makes their own choices for why they teach the way they do? And that's not to say that the training you got was wrong or bad. It's simply to say that you have a choice to teach the way you want and to be informed by all that you've learned from all the wonderful teachers you've had. Don't throw that away. Use that along with what you love about teaching. Use that along with who you are as a person and how you want to come across and your most real and authentic way of teaching. So it becomes your way, your method. When I've talked in prior episodes about creating a signature sequence, I use the word signature because your classes should be your signature, not like everybody else's class. Like, how many times can we say lift the leg and bend the upper knee and open the hip until our students are like, blah, 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 blah. I hear this in every class. Have intention behind what you are saying. If you don't want people to lift the leg in down dog, just say step your right foot forward or do something else, or don't do sun salutations if you don't want to add them into your classes. I always say that the trigger or the catalyst to doing something different is when what you're doing feels cumbersome, doesn't feel easy. So this breathing situation is a perfect example. When you're going into your classes and teaching your classes, if it's hard for you to fit in the breath cues, that's a sign. Your body, your mind, your brain is giving you a sign. This is not working for me. And then the other part of your brain might say, oh, but you have to do this because this is how you were trained, or this is what you hear when you go to classes. And then now I'm saying there's an opportunity you have to now say, wait a minute, everybody, all these voices in my head, I'm in charge. I can teach however I want. What do I want to do? Well, I don't think I want to actually cue to the breath all the time. I mean, it's not like they're not going to be breathing. What if I focused on getting them into the pose? And then I could add a breath cue. And then I go into my next class and I experiment with that. And I'm driving home and I might say to myself, wow, that was so much easier. And then I go to my next class and I experiment it with it again and it feels even easier, and so on and so on. And then pretty soon I've developed my own method, different from everybody else's, in my own unique way. This is how you become a confident, empowered teacher. By using what you've learned, by adding in your own way, and creating this beautiful amalgam that allows you to shine through in a way that only you can. Okay, so with that, the reason I wanted to focus on this topic of teaching online is because I recently taught an online class and I did not do any yoga. I used the walk and talk approach, or the cueing without doing is the other phrase I have for it. And a couple of the teachers that were there emailed me after and said, I can't believe you didn't do any yoga. And so I thought this is a good topic to talk about. I said at the beginning of the class when people were getting set up, I'm not going to be doing any yoga. So just know that you don't even need to look at the screen. This is going to be a chance for you to dive deep into your own practice. I'm going to guide you through. And if you're willing to turn your cameras on, I will be able to see you and maybe speak to something that I'm seeing so that you can feel seen, so that it meets the moment of what's happening. Even without that, though, just know that you don't need to interfere with your own practice by looking up at the screen. I'm going to give you really good, clear cues so you'll know exactly what to do. So right out of the gate, I set the expectation. And if you want to be the kind of teacher who does the walk and talk when you are teaching your online classes, and of course it's less walking because you need to stay in view of the camera, so it's more cueing without doing, you have to tell them. Because when they log on, they're going to be expecting that you're going to have your mat sideways like the gazillion other teachers out there, and you're going to be doing it. So you might as well just say right at the top, here's what I'm going to be doing. Here's what you can expect. So that's the inspiration for this conversation. Is I taught an online class recently. I got a couple of comments. Teachers were incredulous that I could actually have not done any yoga. And I thought, let's talk about this. Okay. So let's take a look at some of the things to keep in mind when you're teaching online. And I'm going to just tell you right out of the gate, everything that I'm sharing with you is in a free PDF guide that you can download simply by going to the show notes for this episode. And if you can't find it, just send me a DM on Instagram and tell me you want it, and I'll send it to you. So you don't have to take any notes. And you can know that you can just download this after the episode and have it as a guide to guide you in teaching your classes online. So number one is to keep your sequences short. I don't think that online classes are the time to go into a 90-minute type class unless it's a special event. I think because people are fitting this into their life and you're literally teaching them while they're in their home, it's a little more challenging for them to find a lot of time because sometimes they're literally practicing in the living room while their family's walking around. So think about teaching 45 minutes tops, maybe even 30 minutes. I would say the most an hour for the class. Number two, use action-oriented cues. Because of the medium that you're teaching online and you're not in the same room with the student, it's so important that they be able to understand what you want them to do with clear action cues. This is not a time for complex cues that need a lot of interpretation. I don't really think there's any time for that. This, though, is definitely not the time because you're not in the same room with them. You want to make this the easiest thing to transmit through the internet. And so clear action cues are definitely the way to go. So think about step your right foot forward, drop your back heel, reach your arms up, warrior one. Drop your back hand, reverse the warrior, lift your right arm up and back. Coming into side angle, bring the right arm down on the thigh, take the left arm and sweep it up and over your ear. Look at the floor, hands on the mat, plank. Come a little forward, lower down, elbows in into low push-up, upward facing dog, straighten the arms, and then downward facing dog, roll over the toes. Right? So again, I'm not demoing this for you so you can repeat me. It's more just to give you an example of what do clear action cues look like, sound like. Number three, hold back from doing the entire practice with the class and instead talk them through the sequence. So this is exactly what I mentioned at the beginning, cueing without doing. I cannot impress upon you enough how this will transform your online classes. Because when you think about the quality of your voice when you're teaching online, it becomes even more of an issue because you are online, because there's going to be ambient noise in the room of the person that's watching, because you might have ambient noise in your space, because you're transmitting your voice over the internet, because the quality of their connection might affect the clarity of your voice. So you're already at a disadvantage for them to hear you clearly. So why in the world would you want to turn your mat sideways, have your head down in downward facing dog, and be talking to the ground? This boggles my mind. Now, I know that there are teachers on YouTube who are just getting millions and millions of views with their practice with me approach. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen. And you'll notice that many of those teachers wear a mic. But for the average person, getting the use of a lapel mic down correctly is really hard because lapel mics for yoga teachers is very different than lapel mics for your TED Talk type people. Those people are just walking around the room. You're doing yoga. So if you're wearing a mic as you're moving your body, it's really hard to keep the mic sound clear because every movement that you make is picked up by the mic. So forget about the mic and stand in front of the damn computer and tell them what you want them to do. Just as if you're watching me right now on YouTube, I am looking right at the camera. I am front facing the camera. I am speaking to the camera. You can hear me clearly. This is the way you should be transmitting to your students when you're teaching them online, right? But it requires a loosening of the attachment that you might have to this idea that you need to be practicing with them based on this false belief that they need to see you doing it. If they want to see somebody doing it, why would they log into your class? They could just go on YouTube and watch a recorded thing. But they came to your class online because they like you. They want to be with you. And they don't need to see you doing the yoga to get the you-ness in there. That's, again, just a story that you've heard. When you start standing in your room where you're transmitting from and just speaking straight to camera, your voice will sound so clear and confident, it will blow their mind. And they will experience your class differently. And I would surmise in a good way, because guess what? They can hear you. I mean, how many yoga classes do you go to in real life where you're in the back of the room and half the time you're thinking, I can't even hear her? That's because teachers are often unaware of vocal quality, vocal tone, speaking with conviction, volume, pace. These are all qualities of your voice. And your voice as a yoga teacher is your primary tool, not your arms and legs. Please hear me on that. Not your arms and legs, your voice. And your voice relates to what we talked about at the beginning, your teaching method, because your voice is your signature. It's your own. So this is how you start to stand out as a teacher. Number 4, let them know the theme of the class before you start. This may or may not be something you're doing in real life. When you do log into an online class, though, it can be nice to add a little bit of that. And because it's online, you're not in the studio, you can even more so do whatever you want, especially if you're the kind of yoga teacher who's teaching in a studio and you're beholden to whatever rules and guidelines that they require you to follow. Now you're teaching online. You can do whatever you want. So why not take a few minutes at the beginning and tell people, here's what we're going to do today. We're going to have a really good class focused on healthy functional movement. You'll have lots of opportunities to stretch and strengthen, whatever you want to say. Number 5, only use music if you can keep your cues to a minimum. I would modify this and say, don't use music. Music is only going to get in the way of them hearing you. And because it's got to transmit through Zoom, I don't even quite frankly know how you would do that from a technical perspective. So let's just say, we're going to just throw it out there. Just don't use music. They may have ambient noise in the background of their space. It's going to be hard to hear. So we're just going to say, let's just keep your voice as the central vocal piece to go along with what you're teaching. Number 6, use sequences with a high degree of accessibility, right? So this isn't the time to do really complicated poses unless this is a special theme of the class you're teaching online. In general, when you have people coming to your online classes, because you're not in the same room with them and you really can't see them all too well, and especially for those students who don't even turn their camera on, you can't really see how they're doing. And so you don't know if they're having a hard time with the pose or how to use the visual to modify what you are cueing. So think about poses that have a high degree of accessibility. Think about sequences that are, like we said at the beginning, on the shorter side. And think about just really clear cues. Like it's almost like acoustic guitar. You're not using any music. You know, it's just that simplified, bared down practice. But it's not that it has to be easy. It's just that what I'm suggesting is that you have a high degree of accessibility. So less of the more complicated poses, and think of other variables you can play with if you want to add a level of challenge. You could hold people in the poses longer, right? You could give them a particular theme and work that theme through the class. There's lots of other ways to add challenge without adding quote unquote super hard poses. All right, number 7, avoid using props except maybe a block in case students don't have them. So you don't know what people are going to have in their homes. Ideally, it would be great if they each had a block, but they might not even have that. So just be aware as you're teaching your class that they may not have that. So starting people out, for instance, in a reclined Supta Baddha Konasana with 2 blocks under the body, like they're probably not going to have access to that. Even if they do, think about what's the most kind of essential way I can teach this class so that anybody can practice and have a good experience, even if they didn't have any props. Number 8, encourage students to turn on their cameras once at the start, and then after that, let it go. I used to get really bugged by this, but then I realized I have no idea what people are doing in their home when they're practicing yoga, who else is around. They may have perceptions about what people might think if you see the room that they're in, if it's messy or whatever. So I don't let it bother me anymore. When I do teach online, I like for at least one person to have their camera open. So I at least have one person that I'm sure I'm in sync with, and it does help keep in sync from the perspective of the flow. So if I don't have anybody with their camera on, I will sort of nudge a little harder to try to get somebody to turn their camera on. But I have taught classes where every single person has their camera off. But just say it once and then see what happens and leave it from there. Number 9, set up students to be on mute when they log in. You can do this in Zoom in the control panel when you set up your class. Just make sure to do it so you don't need to remind people once you start to mute themselves. Number 10, set yourself up in a quiet part of your home so as to minimize background noise. That sort of goes without saying. I won't go into this in a lot of detail, but just know, of course, that anything going on in the background is going to interfere with the quality of the sound that they hear. So as much as you can do to make it quiet in the space you're recording in is going to be appreciated. Number 12. I'm going to go back on this. I wrote this guide a couple of months ago. The point of number 12 is don't record your classes so your students know that the recording won't be used in the future without their consent. Consent for recording is kind of a whole other topic that I don't want to get into right now. I would just say in general, if you want to record the class for your own purposes, go ahead and do it. If you do record the class and you choose to use it later on, like let's say somebody meant to come to the class, they signed up and they missed it, and they email you and they say, hey, can I get the recording? Maybe something like that would be okay. I wouldn't necessarily use the recorded class in marketing or in sharing with people that weren't at the class. I do sort of, even in the electronic realm, sort of think of the class online as a bit of a sacred container where the people that are there, they don't really have any control over whether or not you hit record. But if you do hit record, I just like to think about that space as a bit sacred, and I don't go off and use it without people's okay, or I just really don't use it. So honestly, in general, I don't record my online classes because I don't want the responsibility of having the recording myself. Okay, number 13, if you need to do a test recording just to make sure that everything's working. So, oh my God, I've been using Zoom for like 10 years. And in the beginning, it used to be really hard to get used to all the moving parts. So I used to do test recording. So just think about if you need to do a test recording just to make sure everything's working. Number 14, this is really important. Make sure you have sufficient lighting. If you're watching me, for instance, on the YouTube version of the podcast, I have a lot of light where you can't see the lights, but the lights are facing me, so they light up my face, so it makes it a lot easier for you to see me. You can get a webcam that you can attach to your laptop. You can use external standing lights. All this stuff you can buy on Amazon. If you have any questions about the technical aspect and you want to get some of the lights that I use, just send me a DM on Instagram and I will send you the links to buy. Number 15, keep the area around your mat as clean and clear as possible, and just make sure from a visual standpoint, it looks good to the viewer. So think about staging from a real estate perspective. If you want it to look like your house, you can make it look like a house, or maybe it literally is your living room, but just take away any clutter so that it looks really clean to the viewer. Number 16, after Shavasana, close class by inviting them to come to the next class and tell them how they can sign up. And then a related one, invite people after class to unmute themselves and ask any questions they might have. I love doing this. I find that people online tend to ask more questions after class than people in person. And for me, because I get a lot of teachers that come to my online classes, I find that I have some really good questions after my online class about the sequence I taught, about the cues I used, about breath cueing, about my approach to the sequence, about practicing or not practicing with class. And so oftentimes I end up having like a 15-minute mini workshop after the practice itself. And I just absolutely love that teachers ask questions. So that's it. That is your guide to teaching online. And just remember, you can get this guide either in the show notes or just DM me on Instagram at Barebones Yoga and let me know you want the tips for online teaching guide, and I will send it to you. So in closing, I want to just mention a couple of things. Number one, if you've listened to the past couple of episodes, you know that in December, I launched my brand new month-to-month membership called the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club. And I am happy to report that we have now almost 15 teachers who have enrolled, and we've gotten together for 3 or 4 live workshops. We've started to go through a cueing approach, as well as teaching with the walk and talk, teaching with the cueing without doing approach. The teachers have been really engaged in conversation, in questions. And so we've had some really, really good workshops that you, I'm sure, would absolutely love. Now, the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club is really more than just coming to these online workshops. It's also giving you access to an online portal where every single workshop that we've ever done is recorded for you there, so that if you miss it or you want to go back and rewatch it, the recordings are easily accessible to you. And then I also have other teaching tools in there, like the tools we're talking about here, the tips for teaching online classes, how to build a yoga sequence. So there's a lot of downloadable guides in there as well. So belonging to the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club gives you a chance to get monthly support, to be part of a community of yoga teachers who are engaged in learning and being more confident and being more empowered, and as a result, have really good conversations in these week-to-week workshops. So if you're looking to feel more confident as a yoga teacher, if you're ready to learn anatomy more, to get better at your cueing and your sequencing, to get ideas around themes for your sequences, this would be a perfect month-to-month membership for you. You don't have to join for a minimum number of months. You could join for a month and then leave, or join for a couple months and then leave. It's completely up to you. And I made it so easy to join by pricing it at just $29 a month. So for just $29 a month, you'll get access to all the workshops we've already done. You'll get invites to all the workshops yet to come. And I'm doing them at a clip of about 1 a week or 1 every 2 weeks. It's really looking like 1 a week, because I just love doing it. And you'll be on your way. You'll get the support that you might need, and you'll get to be part of this community of amazing yoga teachers from all over the world. So to join the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club, you can go to my website, barebonesyoga.com, and click the courses page. You can go to my Instagram, Barebones Yoga, and click the link in my bio, or just send me an email or a direct message on Instagram and tell me you want to join, and I'll send you the link. So that's the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club. And the only other thing I would ask is, if you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment. You could even just leave a comment like, "Hi, Karen, loved listening to this." The comments will help YouTube notice that people are listening and watching the show, and they'll send it out to more yoga teachers. I tag a lot of stuff in all of my YouTube videos for yoga teachers. And the best way to alert them that content's out there for them is for you to comment to the video. So please take a moment and do that. Okay, that's it for this week's episode. I hope your January is off to a great start, and I can't wait to talk to you again on the next episode of Conversations for Yoga Teachers. Namaste.